Let's say today is 30th of January and I ask you, what is the next month? What will you tell me? I give you 3 seconds to think about it. If you answered March, then you are right, because that is what the right answer is according to JavaScript. Look at this. I have January 30th as the date, and if I add a month inside this, I get 2nd of March as the next date, which is crazy because we all know that if you are at January 30th and you add a month, or you want to see like what's the next month, it should be February, right? Remember that we are not adding 30 days, we are adding 1 month. And now look at this, a new JavaScript API, Temporal, which is now available inside browsers, well, most of the browsers except Safari, which allows you to construct things like this. And now when you add a single month, you actually get 28th of February, which is the right thing, the right mindset to have. There are a bunch of more such edge cases and gotchas that you have to be careful with JavaScript using the date object, which are now fixed in this new API, which is the Temporal API. If you want to try out more such gotchas and things, and if you feel like date object in JavaScript is great, then I want you to visit this website called as jsdate.wtf. Yes, this is an actual website which you can visit, and you can try out this quiz. This is an amazing quiz which will actually give you surprise on how JavaScript date objects work. So complete these 28 questions and comment down your score below, which is a very interesting quiz which will tell you that this is hopelessly broken way of working with dates. Now, the problem generally happens because JavaScript as a programming language is the programming language of the web. So this World Wide Web that we have, sort of, which is a interconnection of a lot of computers, JavaScript is running on every website, every browser, everywhere. So the core idea with JavaScript is that the maintainers and the people who add new things in JavaScript is that they do not break existing JS. Right? So existing behaviors, even the bugs that are there, are not fixed in a way which will break the existing JavaScript which is available on pages. That is why it's not really possible to fix things or quirks that are there with these objects, like new date or even like tens of different things which we know are bad things in JavaScript. We can't fix them because there are a lot of websites on the web that are using them and they're functioning properly. And if they are fixed, then the existing browsers will break their rendering. This brings me to this Bloomberg's blog post, which is the 9-year journey to fix time in JavaScript. So Temporal is an API. It's a new API, right? As you saw, what I did over with this example, you can see I'm actually running a real Chrome browser. It's not like a beta version or anything. This Temporal API is actually an API which is available on top level now. This is not a polyfill. This is not an existing library which I'm downloading from NPM or whatever. This is a top level library, top level construct, a globally available thing. Just like we have date, we now have Temporal as well. And this has now moved into stage 4 of ECMAScript standard, which means it has been standardized. And it took almost 10 years for JavaScript to ship this API. And people are calling this one of the biggest changes in JavaScript after ES 2015. And Temporal is just one of the many APIs in JavaScript, which you need to know in order to build better software, whether that's on front end, whether that's on back end, or if you're a full stack developer. And that is where today's sponsor of the video, Scrimba, comes into play. Scrimba is an interactive coding platform that allows you to learn programming while you are practicing it. And their full stack developer path, which I have linked for in the description, includes not only just JavaScript, but everything else that you might need in order to succeed as a developer. This includes all the topics that you would need as a full stack developer, including front-end, back-end, even databases and AI engineering. They have a lot of paths to cover from, but in my opinion, if you are taking up a challenge for 2026, the full stack developer is the one that you should aim for, because this is the one that can ship real products end-to-end as a single person army. And thanks to AI-assisted help, which is available in the platform as well as to you generally, it is possible to learn to code faster than it has been possible at any given time in the history. Do check out Scrimba. My link is in the description, which will give you a 20% off when you sign up to their pro plan, even though Scrimba is free to start with. So my link is in the description. Do check it out. And now back to the video. Temporal is the biggest addition to ECMAScript since ES 2015. And for those of you who don't actually remember what happened with ECMAScript 2015 standard, there were a lot of new things that were introduced in the standard. Things like let and const, which we basically now use all the time to create or write code in JavaScript, right? They were introduced in ES 2015. Arrow functions were introduced in 2015. Template literals were introduced here. So this actually included a lot of new things, which is why it is a pretty big deal to say that this is the biggest change after this standard, right? And trust me, you will know why this is big once you complete this quiz on jsdate.wtf. And there is a reason also why this blog post is coming at Bloomberg, which is a finance company, because they work with dates and times all the time, right? So they started with the stage 1, which was a big milestone, but it was still far from the finish line, where this pain was actually real. all the quirks of date objects and timestamp things. We run JavaScript at scales across the terminal using underlying runtimes and engines such as Chromium, Node, SpiderMonkey. Our users and the financial markets in which they invest span across every time zone on Earth. We pass timestamps constantly between services, into storage, into UI, across systems, and that all have to agree on what now means, even when governments change daylight saving time rules with very little notice. So if you're not living in a country where daylight saving times is applicable, you might not know the pain, but this is also another variable in the modern time. It's not just about, dates and times which are weird, like the example that I gave you, but actually like daylight saving times also is there, which skips an hour completely when that is there. So there are a lot of other small things that happens in the real world which is not captured properly with the existing API that we had. So if I give you some examples, you will see how to work with temporal. Obviously, this is not a full-blown tutorial, but you will try to understand what's going on. So first thing is that on temporal itself, you will see that there are a lot of APIs that you can use, right? So if we start with now, and if I do plain date ISO, you will see that I get this object, which is inside my own time zone, right? Including the calendar ID. Now this ISO 8601 is a type of a calendar which we are all used to, right? January, February, 31 days, then 28 days, and so on and so forth. But you would be surprised to know that there are a lot of other type of calendars also there in the world, right? Now, a lot of times people don't really follow it. They still follow this Gregorian calendar, which is the most popular one. But still those calendars exist, and a lot of times you might need to work across those formats, which is now what temporal also allows you to do. In order to work with different types of calendars, you can do that. That was basically impossible in the date API, which was the earlier API that we had. Now you can see that we also have this instant over here, which gives us the milliseconds and the nanoseconds as well from the epoch. Epoch is that 1970 date, right? 1st January 1970, which is where it's set to 0. So these are the milliseconds that have passed from that time onwards, which is basically similar to date.now, right? So date.now only gives you milliseconds, but now with temporal, you also have the ability to get nanosecond level precision. The other thing that is my favorite in temporal is that finally months start at 1. In date, months always started with 0. So January was actually the month 0, but the days were 1 index, right? Months were 0 index, so 0 was January, but the first of the month was indeed first of the month, which to be honest made not a lot of sense to me also, but that is what it was. But now with temporal, they have reverted that change, and now months are indeed 1 index. So this launch indeed has this month of 7, which is July. If I convert this to string, you will see that it is in fact 4th of July. Now, of course, it's not like these bugs and these things were not really fixed. There were a lot of libraries that actually fixed that, or at least tried to fix those things. If you know about moment.js, datefns is also a library. Day.js is also a library that we use very much in our own code base, which has about 34 million almost weekly downloads, right? So these libraries have hundreds of millions of monthly downloads just to fix something that should have been available natively. So you can see over here, temporal is now already supported across Firefox since May 2025, Chrome in January, which is very recent, Edge, which is again built on Chromium itself, so expected to have the same release. TypeScript also supports its types now since 6.0 beta, which is just last month. Safari is obviously lagging behind, but it has partial support in technology preview. But again, this is not something which is available for mainstream users, so it will be probably shipped in another major release. And Node.js is yet to have support for this. So you won't be able to use temporal API in Node.js right now, but most likely soon enough. There is still a lot of work to do for temporal. For example, you can see native date pickers that we have, they still have fallback on date object, right? So if you have something like this and user selects it, and if you try to access that value in JavaScript world, that would be a date object, not a temporal object. Another cool thing about temporal objects or dates in this is you will see that I can't compare them with numbers, right? You can see we get a clear error. Do not use temporal, whatever this with, for comparison. Use the temporal plain date prototype compare for comparison, which is like a very welcoming thing in JavaScript, which by nature, we see a lot of these quirks where, strings can be compared with numbers and weird things happen. So we need more of this. We need more of less number of states in the system, less number of possible things that can possibly happen. And that is why temporal has these compare and equals, these sort of APIs, which are there in order for you to do comparison and equality checks with other temporal objects, which is again a very welcoming change in the world of JavaScript, which is a very relaxed language by nature, right? There's also a super interesting story about how temporal is implemented. If you go to this blog post and if you look at this temporal RS, you will find it all across the place. So what this temporal RS is, it's basically a Rust library of the implementation of this temporal. And this is the first time that a library like temporal rs is introduced in V8, which is the Chromium engine, right? This has never happened before because V8, as you know, is mostly written in C++. So this is the first time that a Rust component is introduced in V8 for doing something natively. Usually what used to happen was that every single engine like V8 would do their own implementation of temporal. Then when temporal has to be done inside Firefox, which is SpiderMonkey, Firefox will do their own implementation. So with Safari, which is WebKit, and so on and so forth. However, in case of temporal, they did something different. They created the core logic in the Rust library, and then every single engine is using the same exact library. So it's impossible for you to have differences in the core functionality of the temporal system. Now, technically, while Firefox could have shared this implementation, in theory, in SpiderMonkey, they actually do not, because Firefox was able to implement temporal, it was being spec'd. So they did it differently and earlier than other people. And WebKit has also not completed the work, obviously. Like we know, like Safari has not completed the implementation yet. They have not shipped it yet. So we don't know if they would actually use it, but it's possible for them to use it because V8 is using Rust for the first time. And the same core can be technically shared across multiple engines. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. If you liked it, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you in the next video very soon. If you're still watching, make sure you leave a comment, "I watched till the end" below to tell me that you were still here. And let me know what do you think about the video.